thing. So first of all, welcome everyone here to the Boswell virtual event series where lowly booksellers like ourselves get to talk to our favorite authors. My name is Rachel Copeland. My pronouns are she, her.
And my name is Oli Schmitz. My pronouns are they, them.
All right. And thank you so much for joining us today. Today is 4,972 of Boswell being in business. The first book from our featured author is Winter's Orbit. It's a queer romantic space opera that won an American Library Association Alex Award, was a Sunday Times bestseller. And their new book, Ocean's Echo, is set in the same galaxy. Thank you so much for being here, Everina Maxwell.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me. So this is the first time I've been in a call where both other participants have had both my books on their shelf. So this feels very special.
Good. I'm glad to hear that because let me just tell you, I run the romance book club with our store, and this book was championed by a fellow bookseller, Margaret, for such a long time. And she kept saying, "You've got to read this, Rachel. It is a romance." I was like, okay. So it was, I would say, probably our most successful book club book. Everyone loved it. And especially we really had a lot of fun talking about the world, the sort of queer norm, society, et cetera, Just everyone had such a good feeling about it. So first I want to thank you for that one. And then, of course, we're so excited that we have a new as well. Oli, what do you think? Where should we begin? I don't even know.
I guess we can start with something that ties both books together. I think somewhere, Everina, in your Instagram, maybe, it says something about you being a big fan of bureaucracy. And I wanted to ask, because both of your books deal in some way with military influence and issues, like what else about like creating or exploring within a military system drew you to write about those?
This is such a good question. So before I jump into it, sorry about all the stuff at the beginning. Have we said what the book is about? Or should I briefly go into what Ocean's Echo is about? Should I very briefly do the spiel? So Ocean's Echo is a book about these two idiots. We love them. It is about a kind of disaster socialite who has illegal mind reading powers. And that was not something we saw in Winter's Orbit. That is a new thing for this book, and it's explained within World. He has illegal mind reading powers, and he comes to the attention of the authorities one too many times, basically. And in order to control him, he is forcibly conscripted into the military. And again, because these powers are deemed to be very dangerous, and there's a lot of social nuance to that, he is basically forced into a mind bond with another soldier, with the idea that this will control his mind powers. The other soldier is Lieutenant Surratt. He is a very kind of he has a very strong moral compass. He believes he is doing the right thing, and when he gets this order, but he realizes that Tenor, the main character, hasn't consented to it, he is immediately confronted with the fact that his orders and his personal moral compass are now pulling different ways. And this is quite near the start of the book. And at this point, Surratt says, "No, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that." And so that is the point where they realize, okay, we can't just say, no, this is the military. So we are going to have to fake this. So they take the soul bond and they fake it for an enormous part of the book. While they are doing that, there is military politics, there are wars in the background, there are space adventures, there are shenanigans. All of this is happening while there is also a kind of very slow burn, like intimacy romance between the main two characters. Rachel, that's a really good question about is it a romance? Winter's Orbit was very much romance. It had all of the romance beats. Ocean's Echo does have all the romance beats, and it does have a happy ending. It fits within the confines of the romance genre as well as the sci-fi genre. I would say this one is a more sci-fi book, because where the romance is, it's very much bound up with this concept of intimacy and this concept of like the mortifying ordeal of being known. And if you know someone, and someone knows you are very close to them, but you're also very vulnerable. And that is something that makes things very, very fraught if you get to know each other before you're ready. So it is all about this kind of being known at this very, very deep level, which to me is a very romantic thing. But it is not so much about the physical, even though there is some kind of physical romance in the book. So I'd say this one's slightly less of a romance, but still mentally exactly the same romance, physically like lower heat level. Yeah, those are the books. Now the bureaucracy. So
That's great.
I really like that question because, as you said, this is a part that I feel it's very, very obvious to me, and sometimes people don't come out of it with that impression. So I'm really pleased that you picked that up. But Winter's Orbit is set in basically a court politics system where there are lots of people basically trying to run the civil government. Ocean's Echo is a piece of military fiction that does not have military fiction priorities. So I don't advertise it as military fiction or science, which is a subgenre of science fiction almost, because you don't have, we are trying to fight a war. You don't have, we are trying to kill the aliens. What you have is the military as this like vast kind of uncaring, semi-hostile, Kafkaesque background to the adventure that the main two characters are having. So the military is an antagonist in the same way that if you are writing a survival story, like The Wilderness is an antagonist. Like it is not set out to, we are going to destroy the military. That's not the kind of book it is. But it is we are setting out to achieve our goals, and the kind of the sheer like cogs in a wheel thing of the military, the idea that everyone is going to follow the same sort of orders, the conflicting priorities at the higher level of the militaries, the adverse effect they're having on each other, the way this creates conflict and civil wars and coups is very, very much part of the issues of what they're facing in the book. And I enjoy that again in the same way that you have The Wilderness and the survival story, in that it's not necessarily personally directed at the main characters. Like I enjoy a good villain. There are villains in this book. They have various issues with the main characters, and the main characters have issues with them. But the bureaucracy part is almost separate in that it doesn't matter whether the people enacting the bureaucracy like you or not. The bureaucracy is just going to roll on the same, and that may be very, very bad for you. So I enjoy that kind of pinballs in a machine thing in a way. And I enjoy, some people trying to do the right thing and other people absolutely not trying to do the right thing. But actually, overall, you can't just kind of press a button and say, okay, everything's okay now, because that's not how the machine works. The machine is still running along in the background. I think it's all well.
And I totally see that too, because as I was rereading bits of the book, I was noticing how these characters are all sort of caught in this web of bureaucracy, and that no one really knows. Like they're just told, hey, send this person here. They're doing this. And the other person just hears that. So they, Surratt and Tennille are just sort of like bandied about by bureaucracy, so to speak. And it makes for a really fun narrative, because it takes so long to get to the final bit where we find out who's kind of behind this, and that kind of stuff. The getting there is the fun part, though. So I love that you don't really have like a villain. You've got a structure as a villain.
I have a bunch of morally grey older women, and I love them, and they are very, very much the villains of the seat, but I'm really attached to them. But yeah, no, in a way, there are some things which happen which seem kind of inexplicable to the main characters, and they all get reasons later, and in a less kind of in a less directive model. So for example, in Winter's Orbit, the main characters were they were in the dark a lot of the time, but they were people who could expect to ask questions and at least get a reasonable answer, like they were civilians in a civilian context. In the military, they are not really allowed to ask questions. They are not getting any kind of reasonable answer. And like the friction this causes, the annoyance this causes is, a major motivating factor, but also means that you can explain things later when they actually meet people who will give them answers.
Yeah.
I also think it's so interesting to think about the sort of contrast between the cogs and the machine side of things, and that sort of seems like a system where it's really difficult, or it's not built to know people. It's not built to consider them as individuals, contrasted with just how significant it is and how important it is to the characters and to the story to develop that sort of intimacy and to like come to recognize and know each other It's a really great contrast.
Thank you. I really enjoy the kind of like individual interactions. Maybe like they may be good, they may be hostile. There are lots of kind of very, very small rebellions that especially Tenel, the main character, who is a kind of chaos engine, is performing all the time. Like everything he is told to do, he will try and find a way to not do it, often to the enormous exasperation of all his commanding officers. And like this would be very annoying in the civilian context, because the military context is almost justified, because he has been forcibly recruited. He does not want to be there. He did not choose this. And so you see him kind of, or you write him doing these rebellions, you're like, okay, yeah, I understand why you're doing that. But that whole kind of individually, they may make friends. There may be some good people, but the machine is the machine.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is a 5-minute slot at some point for me to do a reading. But if we were going to do a reading, I had Suret's first chapter earmarked, and it just occurred to me that this is exactly what it's talking about.
Absolutely. Especially, yeah, I want to talk about Suret too. So we would love to have a reading.
Cool. Yeah, in that case, I will just do a 5-minute reading. And this is the first chapter of Lieutenant Suret, who is the second main character. And Suret is Suret is just out of Officer Academy. And at this point in the book, he does not know what is about to hit him in the form of the other main character. But he is running traffic routes, basically, for reasons which are explained. And he has just had an extremely bad morning. That would help. There we are. All right. There we are.
Technology.
Okay. 30,000 litres of goat's milk, the district captain said despairingly. Chicken eggs, livestock, 50 tons of feed pallets, and that's not to mention all the damage to the hardware. Sir, Suret said neutrally. He stood in the district captain's small, bare-bones office with his hands linked behind his back and stared at the cavalry emblem on the wall behind the desk. The district captain gave him an outraged look. More seemed to be called for. Suret cleared his throat. I believe it was 31,950 litres of goat's milk. The quantity of milk is immaterial, Lieutenant. Yes, sir. And you crashed into this freighter because... It wasn't us, sir. The freighter had to swerve and then it hit the gunship. And why did the freighter have to swerve, Lieutenant? Suret continued to stare at the wall, wearing his best poker face. That would be because we were in its way, sir. This didn't seem enough, so he added, we were attending the scene of an accident. There was a pod in trouble. Suret's unit, his first command straight out of Officer Academy, crewed a tiny retrieval ship that patrolled up and down the edges of chaotic space, mapping the constant changes in space-time disturbance and retrieving any salvage that the churning clouds spat out. This would be fine, except chaotic space tended to drift. A pod had run across some tendrils that had pulled it in like a riptide, and Suret's retrieval unit had gone to help. It was unfortunate that this had caused the biggest traffic pile-up this side of Ocean 3, but in Suret's view, not really his problem. He had followed the regulations. Everything else was merely a side effect. As his direct commanding officer, the district captain knew all this. It was all in Suret's written report. This was more in the nature of a dressing down than a real debrief. The module with all the chickens was retrieved in an orderly manner, Suret added. No chicken casualties were sustained. We do have some egg damage to our sensors. The district captain looked down at her desk, apparently fighting strong emotion, and put her hand over her mouth. Eventually she removed it and said, and the bodywork damage sustained by the gunship? That was when we were attempting to rescue the goat crates from the freighter, sir. You did extortionate damage to the navigation system of a mind-bogglingly expensive gunship in order to rescue some goats. Not fair for the goats to be in space, sir, Suret said. They don't know which way is up. There was a short silence. Suret maintained his poker face. The goats hadn't seemed to appreciate being rescued much, but in Suret's experience, livestock seldom did. The district captain, a short, voluble type who probably didn't deserve to be responsible for all the traffic snarls in one of Ocean's most crowded space zones, sank further in her chair and put her head in her hands. Produce all over space, she said. Thousands of chicken eggs. They were in containers, so it said factually. 500 to a crate, and only a few of them opened. It just gets a bit chaotic when they depressurize. Yes, thank you, Lieutenant. She tapped a screen on the desk. Needless to say, I had command on my back about the gunship, and it turned out the freight company had links to infantry division, so I'm getting calls about that as well. Surratt stared straight ahead. I take full responsibility for the incident, sir. So you said, she pulled up a file. In fact, you said it several times in your 60-page report. Do you know what it means to take full responsibility in writing, Lieutenant Yaley? It means I've had 3 separate requests for your removal, personally, by name. This was a blow, though not unexpected. Sir. The district captain drummed her fingers on the arms of her chair. It was also the fault of the soldier piloting your ship, she said. We might be able to do something with that. I don't particularly want to lose you, Lieutenant Yaley. It seems unfair to let a wayward herd of goats take out the career of one of my better officers. All the pilots in my unit are competent, sir, Surratt said flatly. Any fault was in my orders. This was not strictly true. Retrieval ships were the most despised assignment in the army, and the soldiers who got shuffled into them were the unambitious, the unskilled, and the very new. But they were Surratt's unit, and Surratt had a duty to them. He had been the officer in charge. Guidance lights, the district captain said. Are you determined to kill your career? Is this what it was like talking to your mother? Surratt stiffened. Most people knew about his mother. The traitor General Marit Yaney was a household name, even 20 years after her death. But most people didn't mention her to Surratt's face. Surratt very carefully counted to 5, bringing his vocal cords under control enough that he could say lightly, I don't know, sir. Do you have a way I can travel back in time and check? That was rude. He added, sorry, sir. Sore point. The district captain raised her hand, abashed. Surratt had always found her a solid commanding officer, cautious with her architect's abilities, responsible with her orders, but she had no way to resist pressure from higher up the food chain. She shuffled the glowing files around her desk. We have to transfer you, she said. I'm sorry, Lieutenant, but I haven't been given a choice. I'll forward you the briefing. Say your goodbyes and pack fast. It's on the other side of the sector, and they want you in 3 weeks. I'll find a shuttle, Surratt said. He paused. Sir. Yes? My unit, Surratt said doggedly. I don't want any disciplinary marks on their records. They will be fine, Lieutenant, the superior officer said irritably. I'll make sure their records remain unblemished, but the next time they make my traffic routes into a giant omelette, I make no promises. Surratt saluted. Thank you, sir. My regards to the goats. I'll pass them on, the district captain said. She regarded him with friendly exasperation. And I suppose I should say, good luck, Lieutenant. That is Surratt's introduction.
Thank you so much for reading that, because in my looking back at the book, it struck me as it strikes me every time I read a book where there's like a chaos character and a not chaos character, I guess, just the straight character, so to speak. It strikes me as it must be so difficult to write the sort of strong and steady type, you know, because there's a fine line between strong and steady and, I don't know, boring or just not very well characterized. But of course, Surratt is so wonderfully well-rounded. So tell us a little bit about Surratt, I guess, and how you approached writing him.
I love these questions. These are great questions. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It is more difficult to pin that character type on someone who I want to spend like 130,000 words with, because not only is he kind of the strong silent type, he is also a representative of like coercive military power who has much more power in the situation than the main character. Like there are a lot of things going against this character when you first meet him. I think for me, it's so there are 2 things, one major and one minor. The major one is how characters approach power on a micro level. So when they are given power over someone, what do they do with it? And that is something I'm kind of always looking at as I like develop the character in the first few chapters, to be like, okay, you have lots of situations where you can do the responsible thing, or you can ride roughshod over someone, or you can sort of listen and ask and see what other people think should be done. And that's something I'm really careful with when characters are in a position of power. I think for both Tennell and Surratt, the main thing I did with them was put them, most of the clashes they have are with people who have more power than them. So it is, I think, not super possible for someone to be having, for a main character to be having major clashes with characters under their command and keep them sympathetic, because that is a power structure that like obviously causes harm. And of course, like, fiction is different from reality, and there are different things happening in books, but we're specifically talking about how to keep characters, how to create characters who you like enough that you want to write them for like 8 months or read them for like 8 hours. So part of it is to figure out exactly what power the character has and how they are using it, and just be very like conscious of that. But of course, any character could slot into that. That's not a, you know, you can run that calculation with literally any character. I think the ones that make them kind of me characters, and the ones that make them kind of unique enough for me to want to like spend time with them is, I mean, first it's their sense of humor. Like, I have now written 4 major sci-fi characters, 2 in each book. All of them have very different senses of humor. They are all compatible with each other. So there's always this kind of bouncing off each other effect. What I particularly like about Suret's sense of humor is it is very dry, in that he has a very keen sense of the ridiculous, but he doesn't come out with it very much. Like, it's very much a like, Suret knows the line about it's not fair for ghosts to be in space, they don't know which way is up. Like, that is almost a joke, but also it is very, very much what Suret genuinely thinks and believes. Like, Suret never says anything he doesn't genuinely think and believe. He's just aware that the way he sees the world, in this very kind of, I must follow my own morals to the exclusion of everything else, and the way the world actually is, he's aware that those conflict, and he's aware that when he says things which are deeply rooted in his own beliefs, that sometimes they can come across as ridiculous because of that huge mismatch between how he sees the world and how the world sees him. So in a way, some of his jokes are self-deprecating. He's saying, this is the way I see the world. I know you think that's ridiculous. I'm just going to say it anyway, and I'm going to say it absolutely straight with an absolute poker face. And it's about halfway through the book that Tennel realizes that some of what Suret says are jokes. Tennel of course says things he doesn't mean the entire time. Like, half the things that come out of Tennel's mouth are things he doesn't actually mean. They are hyperbole, they're exaggeration, they're like mean comments. And like, it takes a while for Suret to realize that Tennel doesn't mean everything. It takes a while for Tennel to realize that Suret does mean everything. So that kind of sense of human mismatch, I think, is my favorite thing.
I love that. Yeah, and that is so difficult to do. I've any like character actors who do this, like the straight role or whatever. It's such a fine line to walk, which is just, if you say it dead on, it's funnier. Like,
yeah.
How Suret is able to say this, I wrote this down because it's my favorite line from the entire book. No chicken casualties were sustained. With a straight face.
How dare it in his report. Like, that's yes. A line in his report. You just know it's in all the report, because.
Yeah, and I've seen people on the interwebs also be big fans of the ghost lines in that chapter. Just all of them, fantastic. But is that the humor, the different humor that you build in each character, a place where you connect to them most, or where do you sort of connect to your characters most or relate to them?
Yeah, I think the humor is a big part of it, because I think the struggle for all of us, right, is how we see ourselves and want to live our lives, and how that comes into friction with, sorry, it's still end of firework night, I've got fireworks going on in the background. So how we see ourselves and relate to each other, and how we see ourselves and relate to the world, and how other people see us and relate to us, and how the world at large sees and relate to us. And I just talked about that a little bit in regard to Suret and his own humor. But I think ultimately humor is that mismatch. Like, you are saying either a thing that is very true but is not seen by everyone to be as true, or you are saying something that's like knowingly slightly a mismatch with what the actual situation is. And I think what characters say is very telling in their humor about how they see the world. I mean, ultimately it's about you connect to them through their struggles, right? You connect them through the things that you know they want that they can't have, and the things that you know they need that they can't have. So like with Kiem and Jainan, I knew their insecurities from page 1, but of course not all of their insecurities are obvious on page 1. That is something that, you know, is revealed throughout the book. But it is also very important to me that characters know how to I was going to say know how to have fun, but that's not quite it. I think it is that I know what these characters look like when they're joyful as well, because it is really important to me that we know what joy looks like and we can anticipate there being moments of it in a book. Like I dark books are good and they are necessary. I also really, really enjoy just knowing that a character will be happy at some point in a way that is very uniquely them. And that's something that romance is, of course, very good at, because you're hoping by the end you'll see like what this person's like full self looks like what they look like when they're occupying their full outlines and when they're able to kind of like shine and you can like see that. That's again a very like key part of knowing what that character is. So you know the worst parts, you know the best parts, and the humor is somewhere in between.
Absolutely. Well, I always say like my favorite dramas, I'm thinking of The Sopranos, Mad Men, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, weirdly. I always think of them as funny stories, even though there's so many heavy and dark things, because when you can get down to it, real life is, you know, comedy and drama mixed all the time. If it was just, you know, dark and despair and all that kind of stuff, it wouldn't be really true life. So this sort of these books really sort of strike your ears as reality in some ways, even though there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, because of how you have that comedy and drama mix. So I love that so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not a comic writer, I would say. There's more like outright jokes in this there were in Winter's Orbit, but it really makes me happy when people tell me they have found and liked the jokes, because I was like, they're buried about 1 layer deep. I'm so happy you found them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oli, did you want to take point? We're trying our best to split the
yeah.
So I don't want to talk over Oli.
Well, we have lots of thoughts. We have a 7-page note document, if you must know. Yeah. I guess the next place that I would want to go is looking at the reader powers, and specifically at Tanel and Surit's struggles and how they're relating to others, and specifically to the society that they're in. On like a personal level, I found a lot of similarities to things like, you know, like the spectrum of functionality, or things like masking, and some people developing like very strong control over themselves and how they're relating to people, and others kind of being like, oh, this is a lost cause, I'm just not going to do this. Was there any, or do you see like a connection between the reader and architect powers and how different people are relating in this world to like neurodivergence in our world?
Yeah, so I think it is absolutely valid to see that connection. I'm sort of hesitant to claim it in a way, because I am, you know, as far as I know, neurotypical, and there are like lots of neurodivergent writers who are doing amazing work in the science fiction fantasy genre, and I don't sort of want to say, you know, this is representation, because like it's not written by someone with lived experience. But equally, like if that is a reading that people are coming to, and this is actually a question I get in most panels, and it was about Winter's Orbit as well, and that is making me think about something. It's just like, well, these characters have a lot of me in them. Yeah, so I would say non-intentional, but I would say that's absolutely a valid connection to draw. I think there's historically been a trend in the fantasy genre in particular to be like, oh, like the elves are a metaphor for racism, and you know, this can be done well by authors of color, and by people who share the marginalizations of who they're writing. It has also historically been done in a very clunky way by people who don't share the marginalizations. So I would, even though we have societal prejudice in this, I was almost intentionally like steering away from anything with kind of one-to-one parallels. But that doesn't mean there is not stuff in there which you can absolutely pull out and say, here's an interesting connection, here's an interesting connection. Like, you know, my brain is very much rooted in the society I come from. So like, of course, there is going to be things in there. So yeah, that doesn't feel like a very full answer, but I think that's probably the most honest answer I can put in it at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And it's sort of, I know in other events you sort of talked about like romance or characters coming together as like breaking boundaries. And was thinking like what went into the decision for what the limitations of this world would be, or what the like outside structures that the characters would face in their struggles would be.
Is that in connection specifically with the reader and archetype powers, or
no, like in generally like outside of that reading, just the sort of distrust towards reader powers.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
that's a really good question. So some of it is narrative. I haven't thought about this before, so I'm thinking as I go along. It's good to be asking you things. Some of it is narratively determined in that certain things needed to happen for the plot. Like, so for example, I knew that the reader and so if in case people haven't read the book, apologies. So there are two sets of powers in this world, and they are caused by the alien remnants, which this planet Ocean did illegal experiments with about 20 years ago. And because this planet is a very military-dominated society, it was a part of the military that did those experiments as part of a civil war they were having 20 years ago. And what happened was they made two different types of powers. They made basically mind reading and mind writing. Only the mind writing is called architect powers, because I just couldn't write writer for like 100,000 words. It just felt really weird. So we have readers who can read minds and architects who can control minds or write minds. And what I knew was that these the architects who had like been demobbed, who had survived the Civil War, been demobbed, gone back home, had children, were passing along their genes to their kids. And the original experimenters didn't know this was going to happen. And so we are now on the second generation of reader and architect powers. And an architect can have reader or architect kids, it doesn't matter. They show up in fairly randomly, but readers are much rarer. So some of this I knew was we have architects who are controlling minds, who the military did a propaganda thing to say, these guys are good, it's the readers who are bad. Because 20 years ago, they were in the middle of a civil war, and that was how they planned to kind of, in a way, win it and also have a scapegoat. So actually, architect powers are also quite scary, someone being able to control your mind. But in the society, the military has said that, no, these guys are fine, there are lots of them, it's okay, they're all military veterans. And the idea is that architect powers you know is happening, whereas reader powers you don't, so that's scarier. So I knew that some of these powers were considered to be okay. And then I had to think through a bunch of things like, how okay are they? Like if you have 10,000 architects and now you have their kids, actually that's still not a huge proportion of the society. And it was only the military. So for example, the judges, who are all kind of like older and none of whom were in the military, don't like reader or architect powers at all. They are not allowed in courts because the legal system is not the military system on this planet. So I also knew that with all of that, the readers were the scapegoats 20 years ago, and they were basically blamed for the coup, and they have these scary powers of being able to read minds. But actually, this planet is not a kind of big brother full control planet. They have no way of knowing who's a reader, and they don't actually have much interest in chasing down every last reader. So they have made like actively reading someone illegal, but they have very, very few mechanisms to actually control this. So actually, you've got a whole bunch of low-level readers in society, which is like weird to think about in itself. But I knew there couldn't be full social control. There wasn't a huge apparatus trying to control readers. There was just, if you are too outrageous, if you are too good, if you are too strong, we will bring you into the military because you are useful for our navigation. So it was that weird thing of, yes, reading is illegal. Yes, the army do care about it, and they mainly care about it for the profit of they can use strong readers. They are very useful. But when it comes to weak readers, actually the army don't care very much. And the army is very strong, so you can get away with being a weak reader. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah, I think so.
I love it too because it really strikes me how definitely hypocritical this whole structure is, that the military has decided to vilify one set of powers when arguably, like, I would think it would be much more terrifying to know that there are people out there who can control what I do, who can tell me exactly what to do. So it's really interesting that that's the one that ended up being the okay power in this universe, because that's just, that doesn't really surprise me that the military would think that that's okay.
Yeah, it's not good. It's a weird society to live in.
Exactly. Well, and then sort of jumping onto that, I'm reminded, of course, that the other part of these powers is this sort of idea that readers can also navigate chaotic space. So tell us a little bit about your concept of chaotic space in general.
Yeah.
Did you pull that for inspiration from anywhere, or are you just kind of sort of putting together?
This is a good question. Do I have an inspiration for it? I mean, it would be really disingenuous to say that this doesn't appear in the science fiction genre, right? I mean, you go see any science fiction movie, and at one point, like, your ships are going through turbulence, it's really dangerous, like that kind of thing. We have to go to the wormhole. So I'd say it is that. It's injecting that kind of, again, that survival wilderness into a science fictional setting. Is it scientific? No, not super. This is not a hard science book. This is a space opera. And like, it's very obvious, of course, that I've used the very standard system of space transport, which I first came across in Louis McMaster Bujold's books of you have wormholes, they connect to each other, and these are in, we have terraformed planets that are conveniently close to them, so we can jump through links and connect the galaxy that way. And I started thinking about those after Winter's Orbit, and I was like, okay, so we have these links, we have these wormholes, and we also have these remnants, which are not explained at all in Winter's Orbit, apart from they are just super weird. Main characters don't know anything about them, they're just like, oh, I don't like that. So I did some more thinking about these and about where they came from. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but like the main thing I think about when I think about science fiction like aliens is that they have got to be weirder than we know. Like, for me, the obvious kind of science fiction alien is not humanoid. It's not someone who we can possibly ever create translation software with. Like, we cannot meet them and shake their hand. They are created in totally different ways from us, and they think in totally different ways from us. And in the case of like this universe, I was like, well, what if they are not thinking in the same dimensions as us? And so you have this thing which is kind of unknowable, but stick a pin in that. And then I was thinking, okay, so these probably have a connection to the links, and then I want the links to be weirder, like in a kind of tabletop role-playing game way. I want more blank space on the map. And so chaotic space is kind of that blank space, and that it is a place which does not adhere to the rules of normal space. And so you go in there and things are different in ways that are like somewhat set out in this book, but there is obviously that's obviously sort of the tip of the iceberg. So yeah, that was what I was going for with chaotic space. Those are my thoughts there.
That's great. That kind of puts me in mind of the proto-molecule from The Expanse. Just sort of this unknowable object that's such I imagine a ripe playing ground for you as well too, because you can just sort of throw and see whatever sticks. So yeah, that's great.
I'd say for the aliens as well, like Anne Leckie was probably an inspiration in her Presga, this kind of this alien race that is not just alien but very, very, very alien.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oli, you have a question about chaotic space minds.
Yeah. So without any spoilery, this is just about the conceptualization of them, because in the book, like, there's these gorgeous passages about that like use a lot of really visual descriptions to talk about minds and the vastness of the universe and chaotic space. And I was wondering whether it relates to the way you describe it relates to the way that you perceive your own consciousness in kind of a meta way, or and if not, sort of where you like how you decided to go in that direction with how you would be talking about like minds and space and these things that are very, I think, kind of central to the book.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I would say, yeah, that's the direction I was going in, that this idea that we do not understand space and we do not understand human consciousness. And in a novelist way, I am allowed to say, what if this one was a metaphor for that one? But in a science fictional way, I'm also allowed to say there is a weird link between these two that I have well built into the kind of alien remnants. But this idea that the mind is infinite and space is infinite, and you have this so one thing that happens to particularly the reader powers, but also in some ways the architect powers, fairly early on in the book, is that Tennell tries to use them for navigation. And at this point, his mind basically leaves his body, and he has this kind of out-of-body experience in which he is using senses that he didn't realize he had. And this idea that space, which is this, in a way, the ultimate kind of hostile, inhuman, cold void, can become humanized by actually, what if this was part of our senses, part of our consciousness? What if we could feel space in the same way that we have, like, if you are, if you're at a mountain lake and you can sort of see the water and you can feel the sunlight and you feel the wind and you hear the sounds, in a way you are kind of part of that landscape. And the consciousness to space thing is a way of saying, what if we could feel and be present in space in the same way that we kind of feel and be present with landscapes on Earth? People may, I don't know what astronauts feel like, they may feel like that anyway. But this was a way of like making it much more explicit in a way. So that's part of what I really like about the kind of reader powers.
Yeah, it's sort of a beautiful entanglement.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And every time I see like a sort of visual conceptualization of just like the space between neurons and stuff like that, it looks like space anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Connection
Exactly.
to see and see it literal too, which is great. Speaking of, by the way, I wanted to have a little shout out to your cover artist, Katie Clement, who's actually kind of my friend on Instagram. And she's wonderful. And I think her books really capture that sort of connection between like the space and the character. So,
absolutely.
Yes. Anyway, so I just wanted to say hi to Katie. Yeah. Oh, I really want to ask you this. I kind of want to go back to the romance thing just a little bit. Because I've been discovering, and it's kind of been my journey this year of discovering what's already been there, but these sort of books that blend sci-fi or fantasy and romance in a way that I find really interesting, in that it's sometimes much lighter on the romance, or it's much more of like a, closed door sort of romance that I've been enjoying. And a lot of them come from Tor, funnily enough, and I love that for me. So what do you see as being your, if there are any for you, science fiction / romance, like meshed together? What are your forebears, so to speak, and sort of what future do you see for this genre blending?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so we are having a massive boom of science fiction and fantasy romance right now. And, this was very fortunate. I don't know if Winter's Orbit would have got published had we not been like entering into that boom, entering into that kind of zeitgeist. As you've said, there are a lot of current books coming out. So, these are not all science fiction, but so Jessie Mahalik is publishing science fiction romances, which I like very much. And I would say those are more on the romance side in a way. Certainly more on the romance side than Ocean's Echo, Winter's Orbit. Also, I really like Freya Mask, also out from Tor.com. Yeah, Restless Truth came out same day. Freya's fantastic. It's ridiculous. I'm so jealous. And the interesting thing I think about Freya's books is they are much less closed door. In that, in a way, I'm a more confident science fiction writer, and of course, you know, Freya's not trying to write science fiction, but she's a more confident romance writer in that, like, her romance is just like absolutely top notch. So like the way there is a spectrum of like high heat to low heat romances, and I would say in a way, science fiction and romances in a way, like Freya's writing like fairly up this end, and Ocean's Echo is like way down this end, and Winter's Orb is maybe like there. So we do definitely have the whole spectrum. I would say that what makes something science fiction romance or fantasy romance as opposed to like fantasy with romance or romance in a fantasy background is that the relationship is absolutely crucial to the plot, but there are also very major plot stakes which have nothing to do with the relationship. So in Winter's Orbit and Ocean's Echo, there are kind of major planetary stakes, but they do absolutely rely on the main characters having a level of trust in each other that they probably wouldn't have were they not in this very intense, intimate relationship. And that level of trust they have and the way they're able to be emotionally vulnerable to each other is a thing that solves the plot stakes and kind of saves the world. But also, the plot is absolutely important to the romance, in that the romance would not take place without the plot. Like, they are forced together by particular circumstances. They are trying to solve things. This is not in any way incidental. It is absolutely like, you have to have the full fantasy or science fiction plot and have the full romance plot. And that can be a little tricky, but they play off each other in really great ways. Like, often you find that you're pursuing this like pure fantasy plot, and then suddenly you have like made them talk because they've been stuck in a room or whatever, and you're like, yes, finally. So yeah, I think absolutely, I see a future for it. I think we're getting a lot of stuff published at the moment. I think the one I read directly after Winter's Orbit was A Strange and Stubborn Endurance by Foz Meadows. Really enjoyed that. Weirdly, Foz was writing it at the same time that I was writing Winter's Orbit, and I did not know them by then. It was like 2016. And then like 5 years later, we're like, hey, we came up with 2 arranged marriage books. But that was really recommend it.
I say the more the merrier too. Like, all wonderful, wonderful books too. Oh, and I do want to shout out to A Taste of Gold and Iron, which is probably the thing that launched my year of reading these wonderful fantasy romances and sci-fi.
That is also brilliant. I think I've got a blurb on that one as well. It's great. Yeah. I now get sent all these queer romance books, and I'm like, yes, fantastic. This is what I became.
Yeah. More.
Yes, and I actually read Elliot Schrafer's The Darkness Outside Us because of your recommendation. It's so good. So I had to mention it because I saw it on your Instagram like right after I read Winter's Orbit, and I was like, do I do another sci-fi?
I was a bit like, I'm so glad you did that, and I'm so glad you enjoyed it. So it's a bit like, how do I recommend it? Sorry, the book is The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schrafer. Please buy from Boswell Books. Please support indie bookstores. But it has its cover is not like a million miles away from kind of this one. You have like 2 people staring very intensely at each other on a spaceship. It is such a different book from Winter's Orbit that I felt I had to like caveat it at first to be like, do not expect the same thing. It is basically a deep space thriller about 2 people who are stuck on a spaceship and something is going very, very wrong. It is a terrifying book. It is about, in many ways, I have softened the concept of space in Winter's Orbit and Ocean's Echo, and I like claim that as a right of the space opera genre. Like, we do soften space. We say there will be technology, there will be the stuff that is almost like magic, like space will be a more friendly place for humanity, but actually space is not a friendly place for humanity at all. And The Darkness Outside Us absolutely drilled into every single way you can die in space. It's a great book. It's an absolutely compelling thriller. Really recommend it.
Oh yeah, it's so good. And I honestly, when I was reading it, I was shocked that it was considered a young adult novel. I mean, really the only thing that makes it young adult is that they're, I guess, teenagers.
Which almost makes it worse. Like,
no, it really does. It's a YA novel, like Ender's Game is a YA novel. Like,
yeah.
Not for the faint of heart. I might feature it for my romance book club, and I am not ashamed. Absolutely a love story. with a lot of terror involved.
Yeah.
You might have to warn people, be like, one note before you start this year.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask, just because I'm looking and we're close to noon and I've been loving this conversation so much, but I really want to ask if there's a question that you wish you were asked about the books that you like don't get, or a topic you don't get to talk about as often, that like is at the back of your mind when you finish an event or.
Ironically, like the stuff that I like talking about that I'm not asked often has actually been asked during this panel. This has been a great panel for questions that I like talking about the humor, I like talking about the bureaucracy. I think we've covered most of the things where I would be like, actually, I want to talk about. So yeah, so 11 out of 10, love this panel. What else? Gosh, I really can't. Okay, sorry, actually, I guess, okay, the side characters. I guess that's the one topic I haven't yet talked about, which I would like to talk about. So there are so the side characters in Ocean's Echo I'm really fond of. There are basically 3 of them who are kind of on the protagonist side. There is the Tenel, who is the disaster. His like younger sister, Zin, is almost like a mirror of Tenel, in that she is what Tenel looks like if he hadn't like completely gone off the rails like several years ago. She has all the same kind of environmental factors as Tenel, but she has worked it into something where she has made peace with herself. And of course, side characters are all there to tell you something about the main character as well as to be characters in their own right. And what that kind of gives you this look into is that Tenel is not this like terribly hard done by, like, you know, oh, he had to be this way. Like Tenel is a very complicated person, but it's not just that he has been very like put upon. It's that he has a very complicated family situation, which we see in his younger sister navigating it very differently. And it's also like, you know, his younger sister is probably the person like Tenel loves most in the world. That's a very good sibling relationship. And yet they are on such different paths. And I really enjoy kind of developing Zinuri, and she comes up at the end and she's like doing various important things in the plot that I won't spoil, but I really like his sister. And then there are 2 people in Surratt's military unit, so Surratt's direct reports, who are Basavi and Istara, and they are kind of, in a way, a pair that mirror Surratt and Tenel, in that they have, there is one who is quite kind of, I'm going to say obnoxious, and one who is quite kind of quiet, and I wish you would just all stop screaming and go away. But they're not an order chaos pairing, they're sort of a middle of the road pairing. And what I like about them is it gives you this insight into, actually, this is how people who are not the legislator's nephew or the son of a notorious traitor general, this is how they navigate the military. Like, these are just 2 ordinary people who have come from like a fairly rural part of, I think it's Ocean 2. And they have joined up with the military because, as one character explains at one point, like that's the only way to get ahead in the business they want to do once they like finish out their term and leave the military. Originally I thought, oh, like Firefly, let's do a whole like any of the kind of space series, let's do a whole crew of misfits. But actually I had to like throw that out very quickly, because there is so much stuff going on with the 2 main characters that those just not written to do a whole crew. Like they take up most of the page space in the book. So in a way, when I trimmed it down to 2, I was like, okay, so these are the most interesting things to me, and they are also the conduits for the rest of the crew. Like, you get crews of varying sizes that Surratt is nominally in control of, but actually the people that he is having this day-to-day interface with are Basavi and Astara. And they then come along for the ride. At the end, they have parts to play in the end plot. They are a kind of little group, and I love them a lot.
They're wonderful. And I am glad that you receded the ensemble idea to just those 2, because it gives more room for them to, you know, shine as well. And they certainly do shine. So Jenny actually wanted to ask, because she says that she loves the books, both of them, so much. Would you have any thing to tell us about what you're writing next? I know that's a terrible question to ask, but are you working on something?
long story short, I have another book contracted, and it may or may not be in this universe. It's not yet been decided, but I would like to continue working in this universe at least at some point. At some point, I will probably also write an outright fantasy book. But there's just so much space in this universe, and I want to carry on writing in it.
There's literally so much space.
So much space.
Sorry, I had to do it.
Are there any other audience questions that we have?
I think we're all set. And you know what, Oli? I think we should tell Everina our deep dark secret that we did for this event. You might notice, Everina, that Oli is wearing a sort of a collared shirt here. It's very hard to tell, but we both made space clothes.
Oh my God, that's so cool. That's incredible.
We got space print quilting cotton, and we made things because
oh my God, that's so cool
that we are.
Yeah.
So just to tell you how much we really did love this book, that we're willing to make clothing to show you.
Yeah.
Those are the coolest clothes I have seen this year. That is incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this, mine has pockets.
11 out of 10.
Yeah. One thing we didn't get to talk about that I have to mention, because you can find so much more information about it. Everina has done a bunch of amazing interviews, and you can find even more about it if you read the books, is the queer normative world building, the system of gender reference that still has room for ambiguity and exploration and nuance. It's just really great. It was something that really drew me to read the books in the first place. And I think that it's just a really interesting and wonderful thing. And you can find so much more about it within the pages and in some of the other wonderful events that Everina has done.
Thank you so much. Yeah. A bit close to my heart, but I've talked about it very many times, so it's really nice to talk about other things in this panel.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great space to exist in. It really, reading these books and books like this, where we have a queer normative society, and it's just not a topic of conversation, is actually so refreshing that it's oh, hey, guess what? We as humans can do other things. We can exist and navigate through chaotic space.
This is so true. And I know that that's not just me. A lot of the other books that you showed even today, Strangers of Endurance, Taste of Golden Iron, I can see Nona, Harrow, and Gideon on Ollie's bookshelf. I adore those books. They're so good. But yeah, all these people are doing amazing queer worlds in science fiction. This is one way to do it. I really like it. But we are a genuine golden age for that. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, get into it. So thank you so much, Everina, for joining us today. Apologies about the technical difficulties, but we hope you had a great time, and everybody involved. We will have a link to purchase the book from our store in our YouTube video once we get that up and running. But if wherever you are out in the world, please go to your local bookstore to buy a copy of Winter's Orbit and Ocean's Echo, and have yourself a lovely 8 hours or so. Oli, thank you so much for being my co-captain today. I literally could not do this without you, and we would not have a bookstore without all of you. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you. Have a great day.